Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon entitled Thriving as a Mom, Navigating Challenges and Prioritizing Self-Care. My name is Mary Bastian. I am the Director of the National Family Services Division of the Ministry of the People, Social Development and Family Services, and I would invite the panelists for this evening's webinar to engage their camera so that we can see each of them as we prepare to begin. So a special good afternoon. I know we are on our way to 6 p.m. It's been a long day. Many of you have worked a full day. And so this is extra time that you would usually be spending with your families, with your children, with your loved ones. And you have decided to take some of that time and spend it with us this evening. So we are really grateful. The Ministry of the People, Social Development and Family Services. It is a part of our mandate to ensure that we support healthy and resilient families. And so this webinar is a series of initiatives through the National Family Services Division that attempts to do just that. But we know that we are unable to do this work without our partners, both internally at the ministry and externally. And so we've partnered up, internal and external, to bring this webinar to you this evening. We will introduce our panelists in a short while. I just want to give you an idea of how we will proceed this evening. So we would be together for just under 2 hours. We would begin with a short opening. We expect that our Parliamentary Secretary, Senator Dr. Natalie Chaitan Maharaj, will join us to bring us some special remarks. After that, we will transition into a panel discussion that would engage us for the majority of the evening, focusing this evening on strategies around self-care. You know, as mothers, we take care of everybody, and sometimes we end up missing the most important person that needs taken care of, which is us. So we're going to be focusing this evening on self-care. Mrs. Curlin is our Parliamentary Secretary with us as yet?
She is not. I just sent a message to remind her to join us. So she'll be joining us shortly.
Okay, not a problem. So we recognize that for society to thrive and to be sustained globally, and certainly regionally and nationally, we require caregivers. And we also recognize that care is what we call a gendered task. Many times it is carried out by women, and many times these women who are the primary caregivers in much of our households are in fact mothers. So some of you here with us this evening may be biological mothers, you may be fostering a child, you may be an adopted mother, you may not have any children of your own biologically, but you are carrying out the mothering role to siblings, to other family members, or you are interested in building your capacity to support the young people in our country. And so we welcome you in all of those capacities. We know that caregiving too, there are many cultural expectations of us as mothers. Persons tend to think that it is our God-given role to care for persons. And while we may be strong, we don't necessarily have the capacity to handle everything without support. We attempt to do it, but we don't necessarily have that capacity. And we do require support. Otherwise, we end up burning out and being exhausted. And burnout and exhaustion can at times morph into many mental health issues, such as depression. This afternoon, we want to talk a little bit about why self-care is essential to us as mothers. We want to identify practical and realistic self-care strategies. We hope to learn some simple tools from our panelists as to ways in which we can manage stress and emotional load and prevent burnout. And at the end of the session, we hope that when you go into your normal routine for the rest of this evening and into the ongoing and ensuing days, that you will be able to make a personal commitment to yourself to intentionally pursue self-care. At this point in time, I will hold on the special remarks. Mrs. Curlane will alert me as to when we are ready to do so. And I would invite our associate professional, Ms. Shaila Ramdan, to begin introductions of our panelists. Ms. Ramdan?
Good evening, everybody. So, I have the pleasure of introducing an extraordinary lineup of women to share their knowledge, experience, and unique perspectives on the topics of self-care this evening. So, please join me in welcoming our 4 panel members, the first of which is Ms. Rachel Edmond. So, Ms. Edmond is a pastor, author, and faith-based women's empowerment and healing speaker. She is also the president of the Global Network for the Advancement of Single Mothers, using her voice and lived experience to inspire women to heal, rise, and live unapologetically in their truth. We also have Mrs. Sandra Johnson, who has 3 children and 5 grandchildren. She is a retired public servant and was previously employed at the Ministry of Finance, Treasury Division. After her retirement, she worked at the Ministry of National Security, Office of Law Enforcement Policy. Now, however, she is at home, where she enjoys sewing, reading, and tutoring her grandchildren. We also have Ms. Cindy Hirolal, who is the coordinator of the NGO unit at the Ministry of the People, Social Development, and Family Services, where she is the interface between the ministry and the civil society sector. With over a decade of experience building partnerships across the public, private, and non-profit sectors, she has contributed to national-level development initiatives focused on governance, community engagement, environmental sustainability, and social impact. She is also a single mother to a 10-year-old daughter. And last but not least, we have Mrs. Odessa Curlane, who is a devoted working mother, skillfully balancing the demands of family life with her role as Communications Manager at the Ministry of the People, Social Development, and Family Services. Her lived experience as a mother shapes her compassion and her perspective, drawing on both experiences to enable her to pursue professional excellence while also nurturing a thriving family life. So thank you so much to all our panelists for joining us this evening, and we can't wait to share the discussion with you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ramdan. Welcome, panelists. Before we go into our first question that we will pose to each of the panelists, I want to engage our participants for a minute. Using the reaction button, I am asking you to maybe use a thumbs up to indicate if over the past month you have experienced any of these signs or symptoms. Our panelists can also engage the reaction button. Constant exhaustion. Anybody feels exhausted at the end of a day? And it's not just one day when you have long days, but maybe multiple days, maybe 2 times for the week, 3 times for the week. Sometimes you feel like the week is going on and you're just exhausted. You sleep, you get up tired. Yeah? What about irritability with children? You know, sometimes your child didn't really do anything all that bad, but you're shouting at him or her. And they're like, but mommy, we didn't do it. But you just have no patience and you just wish that they could go to bed by the time you get home because you had a long day and you're exhausted. So irritability with children. What about feeling overwhelmed? You know, some days you can take some difficult things, but then some days it's too much. The same thing that you would be able to manage maybe when you're having a good day, when your energies are high. There are some days, if you have the same challenge, you feel overwhelmed and it's just too much. Yeah, we have those kinds of days. What about difficulty sleeping? You are exhausted. Because remember, many persons said they're constantly exhausted, but sleep is not coming. And then it's 2 o'clock and you're wondering how tall Jesus was, or you're wondering if you could make a fruit cake, although it is May you're wondering how far a bunny could hop, and all of these interesting thoughts are running to your mind, like at Miss Hiralal, 2:37 a.m. Yeah? What about, when you were younger, there were things that you enjoyed doing, but you find lately you no longer enjoy those things. Maybe you used to be an outdoorsy kind of person. You like to go to the beach. Maybe you used to hike. Maybe you just like to do barbecue at home, spend time with family. But of late, you don't really have interest in any of those things. Well, ladies, I got a little concerned because I can raise my hand for all of those. But those are signs that we are at risk for burnout. And the one way in which we can manage burnout is by being intentional about self-care. And so you have come to the right place this afternoon. Since we're all experiencing these symptoms, we cannot say that we have the perfect solution for these challenges, but we can say that we can share what we try, we can share what works, and we can share strategies that each of us can implement in our own experiences moving forward once we are intentional about doing that kind of work. Care is not selfish. It is self-care, but it is not selfish. Many times I hear mothers say, I want the best of my child, so I need to sacrifice. Yes, you can sacrifice, but you can't sacrifice your well-being, because research tells us that the well-being of a parent is tied up with the well-being of their children. And if you are not doing well, then your child may not be able to thrive in the way you want them to thrive. So it is important that you recognize that self-care is not being selfish, and that it is about being intentional about protecting your physical well-being, your emotional well-being, your mental well-being, so that you can function well as a mother, as well as function in the other roles that you find yourselves in as a woman. So, with all of that being said, my first question to each of the panelists, so we will begin by posing this question to Ms. Edmond. Ms. Edmond, what strategies have been most effective for you in balancing the demands of motherhood while still prioritizing your mental, emotional, and physical well-being?
So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me this afternoon. I'm very excited to be here to share with you guys. One of the strategies that I always tell people that they need to engage in is formal therapy. I engage in therapy using the ministry's personnel, right? And it has been very, very helpful and very instrumental in my self-care. I understood certain things about myself. I was able to challenge myself. I was able to learn new things, new strategies to cope, to build, and to move forward in my life. Because sometimes as mothers, we don't realize that we are stuck in a position in our mental, in our mentality, the frameworks that we have. And we don't think that some of us think that therapy is not going to help, it's not helpful, but it is. And it's not just formal therapy. You can also engage in, spiritual counseling if that is the way that you choose to go. But I will always recommend therapy.
Thanks for that, Ms. Edmond. Thanks for starting us off. And the importance of therapy, I noted the importance of allowing us to get some insight, to understand ourselves better. Therapy can be quite taboo in this country. People think if people know that I'm going to therapy, they might think that I'm mad. But therapy, like any other kind of preventative medical intervention, is necessary to ensure that we do not require more intensive intervention. Yes? So thanks so much for that, Ms. Edmond. Mrs. Johnson, I will ask the same question. What strategies have been most effective for you in balancing the demands of motherhood while still prioritizing your mental, emotional, and physical well-being?
Good afternoon again, everyone. Right?
Afternoon.
I probably live by the guidelines in that I do not compromise my emotional, mental, or physical well-being for my children, my grandchildren, my husband, or anything. This is something that has been taught to us since growing up as a child. My father was of that same, principle. He lived till he was about 93, 94, right? We do not compromise. We try to be happy all the time. And as it says, I go by the grammatical rule, I am first person. You are second person. He, she, or it is third person. And I live by that rule. First to begin, I would show you, if I have something to do, I would show you. I would teach you, right? I will show you a second time. I will show you again a third time. No worries. And that is what I got. No worries. Jesus said, don't worry. 3 times you're out. What I will do is that I am a stickler for, if you use something, you put it back in its position, in its place, regardless of whatever it is. It could be a shoe, a brush, a comb, whatever. After that, once I tell you once, I tell you twice, I tell you 3 times, maintaining my cool, don't worry. I don't worry at all. I sweep it outside. I sweep it by the dog. After a while, they learn their lesson. And that is how I rule. That is how I go. So therefore, it's just a matter of taking care of my own mental, physical, emotional, spiritual first. As I said, after God is me. I don't let nothing compromise that. And that's how I rule. I said, simple.
Nice. Thank
Simple.
you for that. Thank you for that. Very practical
Yes.
way. And recognizing that before you can take care of every other person, you need to be able to take care of I. You need to be able to take care of that first person first. And a part of the strategy that you use, Ms. Johnson, is about using progressive discipline, which allows you to keep calm while teaching behavioral strategies to your charges, yeah? Progressively
That's
over
right.
time. Certainly.
That's right.
Thank you
And
for that.
They understand me. They understand me.
Yeah, because over time they begin to expect it. Yeah,
Exactly.
they begin to expect it, and the brain seeks out patterns, right? So if you're doing that consistently over time, then children will begin to expect it. But of course,
Exactly.
progressive discipline takes us into another webinar, so we will pause there for a little bit. But really good strategy there. Thank you for sharing, Mrs. Johnson. We're moving on to Ms. Hiralal. Ms. Hiralal. Good afternoon. Ms. Curlin?
Yes,
Are we ready for?
I was told she's in Senate. I just sent another message because she was
Okay,
trying to
not a
step
problem.
out, so she can, yes, join us. I'll let you know
Okay.
soon as.
No problem. So we're moving on to Ms. Hiralal. Good afternoon again, Ms. Hiralal. We have the same question for you. Is Ms. Hiralal here or have we lost her?
No, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, I'm hearing you and I'm seeing you clearly. Same question. If you can share with us strategies that are most effective for you in balancing the demands of motherhood while prioritizing your mental, emotional, and physical well-being.
Thank you. Thank you for the question and thank you for having me. So I have a couple of strategies because sometimes the one that you think might work may not work. So you have to go down your list of tools. I think for me, self-care in terms of managing my physical well-being, as of recently especially, has been a major factor in keeping myself in a good, peaceful, calm place. So prioritizing walking, hiking, just being in nature. And it doesn't have to be anything extravagant. No one is saying go to the gym and go and exert yourself or follow a particular fitness routine, but the benefit of just being outside and being in nature is very therapeutic. Something like a walk very early in the morning before the day starts. And I do this on a Saturday or a Sunday. Get up and I go up on the mount, find a hill, and I walk, drink a coconut water. And I feel like that has done so much for me in terms of resetting on a weekend, because we battle with so much during the week, having to shout at my daughter to get ready for school on time and then hustle in traffic and then get into the office. So I look forward to the weekend when I can carve that time out to be able to focus on the physical development, focus on my physical well-being. And it's also an opportunity, and this is another strategy. I find when I'm up on a mount or up on a hill and I'm closer to God and I can talk to him. So the spiritual part of this has been another strategy for me. Sometimes you just need to cry out to God, cry out to your maker when it gets very stressful. And I have found that, focusing on the spiritual side of when things get hard, and who are you going to turn to? Sometimes you don't have a friend to talk to at night. Sometimes no one is available for you to reach. You talk to God. And I have found that to be very helpful on a morning driving to work. That is my alone time. I will speak to God, try to get my head clear. And, the tears may come, but it is an outlet for me. And it is a way for me to keep myself grounded before the hustle of the day starts. So the physical side, the spiritual side, and also being very intentional about how you choose your battles. I have learned that shouting on a morning to get my daughter ready and hustling hard to follow a certain time regime does not work, because children hear what they want to hear and they will do the exact opposite. No amount of threats has worked in my case. However, I have been very intentional about consequences. So very similar to Miss Johnson. If you don't pack your bag for school, and if you are not on time to leave the house, you will end up in the late line when we get to school. And then you will face the consequence of that. And that is a lesson there in terms of not following instruction and not adhering to guidance. And when I made that transition from feeling like I needed to control every step of the morning routine to getting her in a particular place to get out the door, and I've released that to say, okay, she will learn on her own now. Because if you don't follow a particular set pattern and you're not following my guidance, you will feel the consequences. You'll end up in a late line, or you might be deduct a mark for your house. Schools have that system. And that has worked well for me. So being very intentional about picking my battles on a morning, that has helped me a lot in terms of just being able to manage stress. And when I don't get into that place of not escalating into a little argument on a morning, I find the mornings are calmer and I can have a better start to my day. So those are my 3 strategies.
Powerful strategies. What I liked about your first set of strategies that you shared, we didn't ask you to keep them low cost, but you did. They are actually free.
Free.
So, taking care, you talk about taking care of your physical well-being, exercise, and nothing major. So that you can start wherever you are at, by walking, by connecting in nature. No particular speed, I would imagine, but just being outdoors and, doing that kind of exercise. And secondly, that spiritual connection. I think that we don't talk about it enough. But no matter where your faith lies, no matter where your religion lies, we definitely do recognize spirituality and that spiritual connection as a strength in difficult times. It's something that we hear traditionally in this country too. And so it is something that we can be very intentional about. Choosing battles, well, I'm still learning my lesson there. I kind of like battles sometimes myself, but certainly choosing them. And more than that, building the capacity in your child to understand and face consequences. Powerful, very powerful. Thank you for that, Ms. Hiralal. And we will round off this section with placing that same question before Mrs. Curlin. What strategies have been most important and most effective for you, Mrs. Curlin, as you manage the demands of motherhood, prioritizing your mental, emotional, and physical well-being?
Good afternoon, everyone on the webinar, especially those of you who are mothers and know that when you get home in the evening, the children need attention. And then here you are on a webinar, they're not getting the attention that, that they want. But of course, this is all for a good. So I would say one of the most effective strategies that I have learned is giving myself permission to pause. Even if it's just for a few minutes, have that time for myself, taking short moments just to breathe. Sometimes I just go out in the gallery and I sit and I just be calm in myself and just allow myself to be at peace, because sometimes even at work, the day is so challenging and you don't want to come home with all of that and bring that to your children, bring that to your family. So I allow myself that. I've also learned that it's important to set boundaries. Not everything needs to be done at once. Sometimes I come in and I have to maybe do a press release, then I have to cook, I have to see about the homework. So I allow myself to, prioritize what it is that I need to get done. And that gives me time, it gives me patience with my kids, it gives me enough energy to cook a good meal, not to rush through some ramen noodles or something like that. So I allow myself to set boundaries, and I think that is managing myself, making myself even a more capable mother. Another key strategy that I have found that works very well is asking for support, asking for assistance. Um, Asking my husband, can you help out with this? Asking my sister, can you help out with that? And that allows me, again, the freedom to be me, to not allow any kind of heaviness to impact the way I relate to my children, the way I relate to my family. Sharing the responsibilities, again, lightens the load and reminds me that I don't have to do everything alone. I can allow other persons to help me, and that helps me. Yeah. I also try to practice self-compassion. There are many challenging days, especially in my work, and that I accept as part of the journey, but being kind to myself rather than critical. If I misspell a word in a media release that goes out, I'm coming home and I'm all, harboring that and really, just replaying it in my mind and those kinds of things. I allow myself to say, okay, so that was a mistake, and I move on from that. Because coming home with that doesn't allow me to give my children what they need, yes? Being kind to myself, and while accepting being a critic of my own self, it allows me to show up fully for my children and my family. So yes, those are some of the key ways that I practice self-care. I practice being balancing motherhood and that heavy job that I carry out every single day. So I hope this is helpful to those of you who've joined the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Curlin. Very helpful. You talked about the importance of boundaries and using the strategy of prioritizing tasks so that you can operationalize the boundaries that you need to set. Because we think that we can do everything. We do think that we are superheroes, but the truth is we may not have some of the capabilities of the superheroes of old. And so we do have to manage that. Asking for support. I hear many parents, particularly mothers, complain that nobody helps them. And we talk about how we have to do it all by ourselves and nobody's helping us. But do we ask? Do we really ask? Because sometimes we have been hurt so much too, and there's so much trauma that we gather over time in relationships, and not only romantic relationships, but, you know, familial relationships as well, that we make a decision somewhere along our mothering journey that we're not asking nobody for no help. We will do this on our own. We will raise our children by ourselves and we don't want no help. But, you know, we need to be realistic and we need to really appraise what is around us. And if we do a good appraisal and we recognize that there are supports around us, persons who are willing and able to support, it might make sense to ask for some help. Yeah. So that stood out to me. And of course, being patient and kind with yourself, because we can be our worst critic. Our self-talk is disastrous. We tell ourselves things we don't even realize that we are telling ourselves these hurtful and painful things, and really being kind to ourselves when we feel like we are not parenting our children the way we want to be doing it, or other persons are telling us that we are failing, but really being kind to ourselves while taking feedback and building the capacity to do better. Yes, it's all about managing that. So thank you so much, ladies. I think we got some excellent strategies, very practical. And there's some other strategies that we came across as well that we would like to share. And there are really 3 groupings of strategies, and some have been shared already. So the first strategy grouping that we looked at had to do with micro self-care. Because I think sometimes when we think about caring for ourselves, Ms. Curlin, is your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to relay apologies on behalf of Senator Natalie Chaitan Miraj. Unfortunately, she is in Senate, as I would have indicated earlier, and she was not able to come out to facilitate this webinar. So again, I do apologize on her behalf. Thank you.
That's fine. Thank you. Yes. So the first grouping of strategies that I want us to think on would be what we call micro self-care. And we shared some of those already. And as I was saying, when we think about self-care, sometimes we think it has to be a large thing. And we think, oh, well, I do have time to think about myself. But if we look at the strategies that each panelist would have shared so far, they were really micro strategies. One thing that you can do, maybe implement over the weekend, like Ms. Hiralal said, or things that you can do daily, or things that you can do on your way home, right? Your approach to parenting, as Mrs. Johnson said, considering if you need therapy, as Ms. Edmonds said. And so some other micro self-care, would you believe, deep breathing, even when you are not in a situation of anxiety. Simply taking 5 minutes when you get up in the morning and doing some deep breathing exercises. We talked about the short walk, also a micro self-care strategy. What about listening to music? Do we do that anymore? Listening to music, whatever genre of music that you like to listen to. Once the music itself is not stressing you out. But listening to music, what about a cup of coffee or tea if you don't drink coffee, or if you don't drink coffee? Just having some tea, sitting for 5 minutes and actually having your tea, not rushing around while you have your tea, right? But actually having your tea. And doing those things consistently over time. Ms. Edmond, you wanted to add? I see your hand up.
Yes, I did want to add one small thing, and it's really a big thing when you think about it. In terms of being a mother, you know, we equate that to femininity and what a woman should be and all of those things, right? And in me thinking about strategies, what mothers could use to, you know, make themselves, to take care of themselves even better, is to shift that thinking, because what we consider to be femininity is actually performative, and it requires and values us to perform and for us to conform, right? what I think we should be focusing on is our womanhood instead, because our womanhood allows us to just rest in that. It allows us to be authentic and to recognize our personhood. And I think that is a very important thing for us as women and as mothers to understand the difference between the two.
Certainly, certainly, excellent point. And I know that Mrs. Curlane's question, her specific question later on in this session, also talks about those cultural norms that we are trying to meet and those societal expectations. And so we will have another opportunity to speak to that. So thank you so much, Ms. Edmond, for raising that point. Our second group of strategies has to do with emotional self-care. And so therapeutic intervention will enter there, but also talking to someone that you trust. Just talking to someone that you trust, not with an expectation that they will solve the problem that you're bringing, but pretty much in being able to talk through an issue. Many times you're able to strategize and come up with solutions as you talk through an issue. And you don't necessarily need the person to provide you with a solution. So talking to a trusted person. What about journaling? You know, I mean, I know growing up as girls, we had diaries with little locks that we thought nobody could pick, but of course anybody could pick the lock, right? But you know, these are the diaries that we maybe had. I noticed that, you know, journals have made a big comeback. Some of them quite costly, but you could use a copybook. You could use folder pages. You can write on your tablet and store it. Maybe that's easier when you're really ready to discard it. You discard it and you write, you know, something else, but really using that kind of free writing strategy to focus on your thoughts. Yes. And setting boundaries, as we talked about, as Ms. Curlane talked about, also an emotional self-care strategy, and accepting help as well, without guilt or without feeling helpless or as a failure. Another way of regulating yourself emotionally. And the third grouping of strategy has to do with protecting your energy. How about that? How important is that? Protecting your energy, choosing your battles, Ms. Hirala. That's protecting your energy, Mrs. Johnson. Deciding you're not going to get vexed, you are going to give them opportunities to correct themselves progressively over time. Yes? Not shouting at children, allowing them to understand consequences, protecting your energy. And also learning to say to people when you aren't able to commit to something. Saying no is not a bad word. And certainly, or maybe saying not right now. Maybe I have many things on my plate I can't commit right now, but I may be able at another time, but not right now. Yeah, so that is important. And moving away from perfectionism, this attempt that we are always trying to be perfect in all of these roles that we are playing. Ms. Edmond talks about it, and making motherhood and being female performative more than just being. Yeah. So managing this perfectionist attitude that we have gathered maybe through the education system sometimes, maybe through messaging from our own parents or our friend group, and that competitive nature that we gather over time, wanted to, you know, keep up with the Joneses or whatever they're calling the people that we need to keep up with these days. And really trying to manage this idea of perfectionism. So we're moving on to question 2. And question 2 is all yours, Ms. Edmond. Focuses on a fourth strategy. And we're going to give Ms. Edmond the opportunity to interrogate that strategy for us a little bit through her question. And that strategy is about utilizing formal and informal support systems as a self-care strategy. Because in the Caribbean, we talk a lot about, you know, long ago, we would say that the village helped us raise our children. But the village wasn't only about attempting to support, but the village was also supporting the mother in that helping to raise the child, quote unquote, right? And so there are many formal and informal systems that we can tap into as a strategy for self-care. Maybe family, maybe friends, maybe parenting groups, maybe faith or community networks to help us build our own resilience and receive the kind of supports that we need. So, Ms. Edmond, to you, what challenges have you faced in attempting to build some of those formal and informal systems, firstly? And do you think that those networks are positive ways in which you can thrive as a mother, as a parent? Over to you.
Yes, yes. Um, I think that a lot of times we limit ourselves because one, we don't have information, and two, we've been so programmed to think that this is better than this, right? So some of the the areas that I was able to utilize was female spaces, especially online, because I wasn't a person while my children were young, because I have grown children. I wasn't a person that had a lot of support from family or friends. I didn't have a lot of friends, right? And a lot of persons didn't have children. So I had to seek out those networks, and I found some online, female empowerment spaces, women's only groups, etc., where I was able to, pose questions, ask other mothers. I could connect that way with mothers in Tobago, in San Fernando, San Grande, and all these different places across the island, where we had different perspectives, different upbringings, different backgrounds, different religions, everything. And we were able to discuss a plethora of issues relating to motherhood and womanhood, right? Um, when I started the global network, that was the reason why, because I couldn't find anything to support single mothers, right? So if you are looking for those networks and you can't find any, you can create. You have to be the change. I felt I needed to be the change that I wanted to see. So I created something where people who were in similar situations, they could come and get support in that way. Utilizing the formal networks, like I said earlier, there are available places that you can go, institutions. You just have to seek it out. We are in the information age, and we have to utilize the information. We have to utilize the tools that are available. And if you don't know, just talk to somebody. Open your mouth. Closed mouths don't get fed. Talk to somebody. You never know who you talking to, who can connect you to the network that you need. And you just need to know that, that's a safe person, right? Somebody who is knowledgeable. Let's say you're working in a bank or something like that, a company. Talk to the manager. See, feel them out, see if they can give you the information that you are looking for. Google. There are so many things that you can do. Talk to your pastor. Talk to a person in the women's empowerment spaces or motherhood spaces, or those different kind of spaces. Do those things. Take mini steps. It's difficult to ask for help. I know this because I had a problem asking for help, right? I didn't want nobody to know my business. I didn't want nobody to, all those different things swirling around in your head. But when it came to it, I realized I needed to ask. So I asked, and I found spaces. I went into those spaces and got what I needed. So I'm challenging everybody on this webinar to utilize your networks. Utilize them, whether they are informal or formal.
Thanks for that. Networks, critical. Critical for so many things. Certainly critical for self-care, for being able to find supports that you yourself do not have within your own inner circle. You may not have that kind of support, as Ms. Edmond has shared. But knowing that those supports exist somewhere, they do exist somewhere, right? And reaching out and building a network. I think networks are critical, more so now than ever, and a bit easier to build now if you are able to curate that through online spaces, making sure that those spaces are safe, of course, Ms. Edmond, because it could be difficult when persons start to comment on things people say, etc. But certainly an opportunity too that we did not have in the past, to be able to reach out and build networks, even if you cannot physically go out and do that. And your second point about if you need something and you cannot find it, create it. That's phenomenal for me. That is phenomenal. I think that is how we have so many groundbreaking types of community-based interventions taking place in this country, right? It was because persons looked around for some service that they required or some kind of support. They didn't find it, and they decided to create it themselves. Excellent. And maybe one person can't create it, but maybe when you're talking about it amongst your network, the network may decide to come together to create it. Yes? So thank you for that. That is your contribution. I really appreciated that, and I took some notes myself. Thank you very much. Mrs. Johnson. Mrs. Johnson is our grandmother panelist, and I think she has a lot of lessons of mothering from a intergenerational kind of perspective that we can benefit from. Mrs. Johnson, there is a strength in that extended family type of scenario. Yes, even when parents, mothers themselves have to work long hours, or they are struggling themselves with things that they need to get done. When there's a grandmother, there's a grandparent in the household to add support, it makes all the difference. And then sometimes grandparents themselves are providing primary care for their grandchildren because the parents themselves are unable to do that. And that kind of intergenerational support within communities really form an informal type of support for families. And so we want to ask you, Mrs. Johnson, looking back at your own mothering journey, your own parenting journey, right? What key lessons or insights would you like to share with mothers today? That's my first question for you. Looking back at the way in which you mothered, what insights do you have to share with mothers today?
Thank you for the question. Okay, much as I agree with Miss Edmond, I grew up at a time where we didn't have all these networks, right?
Right.
Facebook and this and that and the next, which I don't relate to too much right now. I educate my children in that regard and my grandchildren, but I don't have the time to be on that. It takes too much time to sit and read or so or something like that, right?
Yes.
But what I remember, what I am trained them on, I should say, is when I was at school, secondary school, we had a principal, and every day he would give us a quote for the day. It is something that I have carried throughout my life. It is something that I have passed on to my children and even passed on to my grandchildren. The quote used to be so motivational. It used to be so inspirational that it was a way of life. It was a way of thinking, right? It was a lot of quotes that it keeps you grounded spiritually, right? Things like I would tell them, simple quotes. We had a book. I don't know if you all will remember that book. You all are much younger than I am. We had a book we used to call the Student's Companion. I don't know if you all remember that book.
Yes,
right?
I remember it.
You remember it. But that's a book they no longer have on the market, but is a book that I think that Ministry of Education should bring back. I just think so, personally. There were a lot of proverbs that I use today, and that's how I guide them, by proverbs. By proverbs to get them to do their work. I say, well, say, remember, stitching time saves nine. Strike while the iron is hot. Do it today. Do not put off for tomorrow what you can do today. And I would impress upon them a lot of these proverbs. And they too would recite those proverbs back to me before I could even say to them. And that is what motivates them and have them going. And as I said, I have 3 professional children, and I grew them up on these same proverbs. And I'm growing up my grandchildren on the same thing, that it gives them a different type of thinking. You understand? Walk, put God in front. Anything you do, say, think, put him in front. As I would say, if you see a fight going on in the south, where would you go? To the north. If you see a fight going on in school in the east, where would you go? To the west. They would answer that. You understand? As a matter of fact, from the beginning, as I would say, and I have no bones about it, and I still don't have any bones about it, I don't let the tail wag the dog. The tail doesn't wag the dog at all, right? So they know they must fall in line with what I teach them. And I won't teach them to go astray or to go in the wrong direction. But whatever part of the world they may go to study, they would carry those teachings with them. Even my grandson, he is in 6th form at QRC right now, and he would say, no, moms, you know, one of the quotes that you told me, I had to use it today. He's doing the same sociology stuff, right? He has that exam today. He said, I had to use that quote. Yeah, but which one of those quotes? Because I use so many of them, right? And he would say, the one where you said, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still, because they would be arguing ideas. And some of the ideas, you could say the other boys and them, they're not accepting it, but they say, okay, we would agree that, and we today say we would agree to disagree, right? But I taught him that. I teach them the heights of great men were not achieved by sudden flights, but whilst their companions slept, were toiling through the night. You know, I kind of ground them on these proverbs, on these ideologies, and they keep it here. They take it here. Study hard. Let your light for tomorrow shine today. You understand? And this is what I teach them. And so I don't really go on the Facebook and the all these different platforms that you have. I don't really go in on that. I teach them from these proverbs that is strong, that is binding, that could teach them. Because to me, and watching some of those plans that are lies, right? People just telling you what they want. They just want likes and how much likes, and because it depends on how much money they could make from the likes. So I don't really base my life on that. And I try to teach them that. I said, these people are just lying. Like I will tell them. I said, have you made your money? Have you made your money? No, moms. I said, so why are you supporting somebody who have made money and you are helping them make their money? But have you made your money? You should be studying your work. You understand? Where you can make your money. And that's.
But tell me something, Ms. Johnson. Sorry to cut you off. Tell me something. In your time, when you were doing your parenting, how did you take care of yourself? How did you ensure that you implemented self-care?
Same thing that I do today, because I work for 40 years in the Treasury, right? I enjoyed every single day of my job, every single day. When I come home, I was most relaxed. I am always relaxed in my job. My staff appreciates me. As I told you in the meeting before, I give my staff a joke every morning. I give my staff a joke. A happy staff is a productive staff, right? So I always make sure my staff is happy. I am happy, the work gets done. And that is how I operate. You understand? No stress. As I tell them, no stress, no worries. We stress not. We want to be stressless. Right? Sometimes you will have an officer who would come and they would say, I say, okay, cool it, cool it, cool it. Sit down. Close the door. Let us hear. And they would go on to relate. And I would say, I don't agree with your approach on that, whatever it is they are telling me, right? In my opinion, I think this is how you should go, right? And they would say, okay, Ms. Johnson, I'll take your advice on that. So I said, give me feedback. I always want feedback. Give me feedback. Don't just, when I give you a piece of advice, you leave and I hear nothing else about it. I want feedback. Come and let me know. Ms. Johnson, you know what you told me? It worked. Or Ms. Johnson, you know what you told me? Ms. Son didn't agree. It's something. Let me know so I will know how to take a next direction in what I have to enlighten you on. And that is how I operate. That is how simple, as I told it, simple. No fuss, no bother. Simple. And I teach him, teaching my son, my grandson mathematics. I would say, when you finish and he learn, I say, you understand? Yes, relate it back to me. Teach me now. He would teach me. And then he would then, Mom's simple. I am good.
Thanks for those strategies, Mrs. Johnson. And, I hear you in the motivational quotes and the proverbs. I think those are powerful. But I think what you're not telling us too is that you were also modeling that behavior for them as well.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the very behaviors that you wanted to see in them, you were also modeling those behaviors in them. And so I recognize that and I take those as some powerful points. Thank you for that. Ms. Hiralal, we as a professional woman, Ms. Hiralal, and a head of department, you work with mothers as colleagues, as direct reports within communities, within organizations. And, I know that you recognize the role that self-care plays with women, but also you see the challenges that women experience. Yeah. And we know that all women can benefit from some kind of support in their mothering role. So my questions to you, first of all, in your experience working with mothers, what are some of the most common barriers that you have noticed that they face when trying to implement self-care routines? And well, the second question, of course, how can professionals, communities, and workspaces better support these mothers so that they can overcome these barriers and prioritize their well-being? But we'll start with one, which would be from your experience. What are the most common types of barriers you think that mothers face in trying to take care of themselves?
Thanks for that. So, speaking from my own experience, because I also have a supervisor, I think the major challenge that I've observed and I have also experienced is time. We say we don't have the time to do certain things. I want to exercise, but I don't have the time. I want to, take a little relax, maybe run away, go to the beach, have a day to just reset. I don't have the time because there's homework, there's after school activities. You might be taking care of an elderly family member as well. You have to, weekends are just as busy as during the week. So you're running errands on weekends, you're fighting up in traffic, the same Monday to Friday. Time is a barrier. But you have to be intentional about creating that time for yourself. And as Ms. Johnson said, I am, you are. So I am first, and being intentional about creating that space for you. Otherwise, the 24 hours in the day are going to go by, and more, you are not going to prioritize yourself. So time is a key determinant there. Also, and that is also tied to having maybe limited support systems. So as a mother, especially for single mothers, they may not have an available support system that they can rely on to ask for the help. So the time could be created to focus on the self-care. And that becomes a challenge because as a mom, your shoulders broad and you are doing everything. So you want to take a little walk in the afternoon, you want to focus on yourself, you want to do something for yourself, but you don't have a support system. You have to think about who's going to look at the children, who's going to do homework, who's going to cook, right? Because who's going to do the laundry? You, because you are carrying everything. And okay, we can look at another barrier, financial. Well, if I had money to pay a babysitter, then I could go take a walk, do a little running, maybe eat better. Have we seen how expensive it is to eat healthy? It is very expensive to follow a healthy diet. For those that are, maybe more health conscious, eating organic and eating whole foods, it is very costly. It's easy to toast a hops and put some cheese on it and you're running with that, and at the end of it, these things catch up because it has an impact on your physical well-being. So there are those that may be experiencing the financial constraints. The desire is there, but they may not have the capacity financially to be able to do certain things. So I think those are the three. One that I think that has stood out for me, and I have observed it within my very close professional network. As mothers, I think we tend to lose our identity as a mother. Before we became mothers, we were individuals, we were whole persons, we had interests, we had likes, we had hobbies, maybe. And then you become a mother and you take on the identity of momming and parenting, and all of your likes and interests are tied up into caring for children and caring for the family. Going back to maybe who you were before becoming a mom in terms of your likes, your interests, and finding yourself there a bit. I think that is something that we tend to forget. And I can speak from experience. I like what my daughter likes now. But before having a daughter, I was ziplining, I was traveling, I was doing a lot of things, right? I was more adventurous. I was hiking, I was very outdoorsy. She likes to go to Miniso. She likes to watch certain things on TV. She likes to color. So I like those things too. Now, though, now that I've been prioritizing self-care, she is liking the things that I like. So she's going on my walks with me. We are doing more outdoorsy things. And that to me is a win-win there because we get the healthy, we get the outdoor part, we get the healing bit of it. And then we also get to spend time together. So again, you have to be very intentional about it. But those would be the 4 major barriers that I've seen.
Okay.
There was another part to the question.
Yes, and the other part of the question, given these barriers, how can professionals, communities, and workplaces better support mothers in overcoming these barriers?
So I think definitely on the professional side, for the moms on here that have the 9 to 5, 8 to 4 job, or maybe don't disconnect after the 4, you're still carrying work, but you're plugged into that system. I think having appropriate support measures in place for professionals who are moms. So when my daughter is sick, I don't have any leave that I can take specifically because my daughter is sick and I have to stay home and take care of her. I take either vacation day or I have to say I am sick. And that really is not the case. So for example, when I get sick, all of my sick days might be used up because I've taken care of my daughter several times during the year. So having appropriate support measures in place for moms to be able to tap into something like flexible work. And I know for those in the public sector, that is not widely available. But I think it comes down to having a very understanding supervisor as well, and building that relationship where some concessions can be provided. If a child is unwell, maybe you can work remotely, coming in late and not being penalized, and all of those things build anxiety too. And I'm speaking from experience here. There have been times where I'm going to be late because, the schedule in the morning went off and you're mindful of the fact that you're going to be in late for work, and that affects your mental well-being because anxiety builds. And then, having to ask for time off to be able to attend a school event or to be able to go to the doctor, these things can be seen as tied to performance issues. That's a real thing for professional moms that I've experienced. It is something I think is quite common for professional moms. So I think professional environments, we need to look at having psychologically safe workplaces, if that is a thing, where moms don't have to feel like they are sacrificing one for the other. in terms of being able to be a mom and be a professional. And that's also tied to something else I've observed. Like, we have a tendency culturally to shame moms when we drop the ball. We're not perfect at all and by any means. But you see it on social media. The mother took her eyes off of the child for a minute and something happened. She's a human being too. And then, the online community, we tend to shame mothers a lot for not living up to a certain standard. So I think as communities, that sense of shaming and having unrealistic parenting standards, that is something that we need to be very mindful of and move away from in terms of supporting mothers, because then there may be a mother that is in need of help, but maybe hesitant to reach out to a community for help out of fear of being shamed or critiqued for not doing it a particular way. So those are my two areas that I feel have stood out for me as a professional and within my particular network.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think the last one that you highlighted is significant. This fear of being shamed. We can be our worst enemies as women to other women, and so obviously as mothers to other mothers. This propensity to want to judge when we don't even have all the information before us, and that can be devastating to other mothers, to other women, and we really need to do better. We need to do better for each other, because if we reflect a little bit on the way in which we are doing the work, we would realize that we are also struggling. So if we are struggling and our realities are not perfect, then when somebody else comes clean and allows some vulnerability to show, and then we run in judging them without really knowing the full picture, it can be devastating. So we need to do better, because that fear of shame, when we make ourselves vulnerable and we don't get the grace that we expect, it can make it difficult for persons to want to ask for help at all. And of course, you pointed to policy shifts that need to happen across sectors, public sector, private sector, certainly some policy shifts around more flexible work and around supports for caregivers, particularly family caregivers. So there is a lot of room for building out a care system that facilitates for that as well. So thanks for that. And I think it falls in line with Ms. Edmonds' sharing with, we need to find ways to support each other. And if we don't have the ways existing right now, then certainly we can create some ways within the communities in which we live. And if we're not doing any of that, we could just be kind to one person as we meet them on our daily walk. Just choosing kindness. For mothers that we don't know, but knowing that we are having similar experiences, no matter where we fall, socioeconomic, professional, vocational level type of work, we are having a mothering experience. And from listening to our panelists and professionally over the years, listening to mothers on the whole share about what that experience looks like, we're all having similar challenges. We're having similar challenges, and there are things that are working, and they're working across the board bit by bit, but certainly choosing kindness. So thank you so much for that, Ms. Hiralal. I will come back to panelists for them to give us their take on questions that they didn't get to comment on, right? So we'll get back to that. But I want to move on in sequence to Mrs. Curlane at this point in time, as we talk a little more about societal expectations and cultural norms around mothering. Earlier we talked about this cultural expectation that women will carry the burden of care, as it were, that we are expected to do it, and we are expected to do it perfectly. And that not only are we expected to do it, but that we can handle it. We can handle all the challenges, and we can handle it on our own with limited kinds of support, while we're also being a worker somewhere. We are also being somebody's daughter. And probably these persons are aging. So we're probably also offering care to these people who we are daughters to. So we're caring, mothers, fathers, we're probably doing some care there. We're mothering our own children. We are also wife or partner, otherwise to our significant others. Then we're probably involved in a church community and maybe involved in some leadership there as well. And yeah, so we're doing all of these things and still expected to handle everything and be strong as mothers. And so, Mrs. Curlane, first of all, we want you to talk a little bit around the role that you see societal expectations playing and cultural norms in shaping a mother's experience. Let's talk a little bit about that first.
Good evening again. In my estimation, societal expectations and cultural norms, they play a powerful role in shaping the mother's experience. And of course, you would have gone into some of the expectations and of being there for everyone. And those expectations create pressure on the mothers to do it all. And not only to do it all, but to do it all perfectly. And this can lead to guilt, it can lead to burnout, it can lead to a feeling that prioritizing oneself or yourself is wrong. You are not supposed to focus so much on yourself because you have so much to give, or you are supposed to give so much. Yeah. These norms are not fixed. They can be reshaped, and mothers themselves can play key roles in that process. For me, one important step is redefining what good motherhood looks like. Being a good mother does not mean self-sacrifice at the expense of your own well-being. It means being present, healthy, especially, Cindy would have referred to taking those walks and eating properly. And of course, that commune that she has with her own daughter, being emotionally available. All of that requires taking care of yourself. For you to be there for them, you need to take care of yourself first. Mothers can also begin by setting boundaries without guilt, because sometimes that is our problem. We know that we have to put up these boundaries. We know we have to take care of ourselves, but we feel guilty about it. This might mean saying no to unrealistic expectations. You have to be there for everyone at all times. That's unrealistic. Sharing responsibilities plays a part, especially within the household. Calling over a neighbor, friend even, to assist, or carving out time for you to rest for your own personal growth. I would have referred to myself earlier. I take some time just go in the gallery, maybe walk down the hill, and I get that time for myself. These boundaries are there to protect us for our well-being, but also would model good behavior for our children. Like Cindy, again, because she would have given some examples of how she relates to her daughter. Now that is setting good examples for them. They see you taking care of yourself.
Mrs. Curlane, you're breaking up a bit. Can you repeat? I don't know if it's on my end, but I found that you were breaking up a bit. You can turn off your... Isn't that...
So they want to take care of themselves, and then of course they want you to take care of yourself, right? Another powerful approach, in my estimation, is building and leaning on support systems. I would have referred to that earlier, using family, and if there's an extended family available, even close friends and relatives, the godparents, whether through those networks that you would have built within your family. When mothers especially support one another openly, they share their experiences, see that it is not you alone. So you can relate to someone else's experience, they can relate to yours, and that kind of builds up, and that puts you in a position where you can be your better self. Yeah. And it challenges the idea that you must manage it alone, because you have those persons that you can rely on. So building community, leaning into your support systems, very important. Additionally, shifting the narrative through conversation is key. Speaking openly about it. Not the guilt part again would subside, but you have to be willing to speak openly. When you interacting with your friends, with your family, even, you let them know what's happening. You let them know if the support is needed, right? That ensures rather that you'll have that mental health capability to be there for everyone, to be there for yourself, and of course to be productive in the workplace. Because at the end of the day, remember, we are mothers at home, but then we have to go out the next day to work. So we have to be mentally healthy. Self-care is important. The challenges of motherhood, especially women, help to dismantle the stigma and create space for more honest, supportive environments when they relate to each other. Redefining these norms is about recognizing that mothers are not just caregivers, they're individuals with their own needs, goals, and aspirations. When mothers prioritize their well being and growth, they are not taking away from their families at all. They are instead strengthening them by strengthening themselves. Because when the mother is strong, and we know this, when the mother is strong, the family is strong. Yeah. So creating that space for self-care is important to motherhood. It's essential, and it's part of thriving as a mother. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mrs. Curleen. I think somewhere along the line I lost you. I don't know if that happened for other persons, and I'm still seeing you stuck, but eventually I did get back. So I hope that we were able to benefit from the majority of the contribution from Mrs. Curleen. I think she answered the other question that I had, which really was about ways in which mothers could manage that expectation. But I did hear her talk about ways in which that could be managed. So thank you so much for that. So I've come to the end of the questions that I have for the panel, but I want to go back to each panelist and ask if you would like to make any additional comments, either on the area that we had asked you to respond to, or on any other area that you were not asked to respond to, but you do want to share some insights. So I will go back from the top and ask Ms. Edmond if she can take the mic and give us some concluding comments and address if there's anything that you think that our mothers on this session this evening would benefit from that you've been unable to share, or there's some pressing matters that stood out to you from comments of your fellow panelists and you would like to add. The floor is open to you.
Thank you. I think Sandra was talking earlier about the way that she dealt with her staff, right? So I'm talking about the professional question that you had asked Cindy before, right? And I really think that, in terms of being a professional, being in a professional environment, I think that if you do not consider everything about that particular employee, she's a mother, she's a single mother, she's, all the things that make her her, you will never get the best out of her. And if you're not putting those things, those measures in place to support her, right? Whether she's a mother, with adequate support, or she's a single mother, everything needs to be taken into account in terms of how you deal with her as an employee. That's one. The second thing, in terms of taking care of yourself, there are 5 things that I think are fundamental: sleep, food, rest, water, language. 5 things, right? In the Bible, Jeremiah, or one of the prophets, I don't remember exactly, they were depressed. And God said, take a sleep, eat some food, right? When you wake up, go again. So eat and sleep. Eat on time, sleep enough, get enough sleep, because sleep is not rest, right? Rest is different to sleep. Rest is more, taking time out, doing nothing, just being, right? Hydrate, of course. Our bodies are 70% water. We need to hydrate and put back electrolytes into our system when we exert ourselves, etc. And language, in terms of language, I want to say that I found language to be very, very helpful when I went to therapy, right? I'm going back to therapy again because I did not have the language when my children were younger to be vulnerable with them. And now that I have gone through the process of, unpacking and all of that, I have the appropriate language to speak to whomever it is I want to speak to express, I'm sad, I am angry. A lot of times people will look at you and misinterpret what you are actually feeling. So somebody might say, "Oh, why are you so angry?" I'm not angry, I'm actually sad, right? And so language helps to bridge the gap and help you to be able to, express what is going on, right? And one final thing in terms of cultural shifts, men and women both need to um, change the way that they see women, in this case, women's work, because the things that mothers do is not necessarily a gendered thing. Men can nurture, men can love deeply, men can take up the mental load that women often take upon themselves, right? They can do so much more. And there's one more thing, gray divorces, right? I think Mrs. Kerr Lane was talking about, having that person there. And in a lot of cases now, we are seeing older women, older mothers leaving their marriages because they didn't have that support. They had somebody in the home, but they were not supporting them. And over time, resentment builds because you might not have the language to say, this is how I feel. The other party may not be listening. You're not using any of the tools that therapy provides. So you always have conflict and all those different things. So we have to understand what is happening so that we can know what interventions, what measures we can utilize in order to prevent them from happening, right? So those are my contributions.
Okay. Well, I don't think I need to add. I think they were clear. The only thing I would add, I know you talked about eat, sleep, hydrate, and language. I would add to your language component not only about the use of language when it comes to communicating outward, but also about the way in which you talk to yourself inwardly. That you also need to find that language because that language is quite protective when it comes to be able to build your resilience and your own capacity to take care of yourself. So I would add that little piece to your language component. But thanks for that contribution. I think everything else, was clear. Thank you, Ms. Edmond. Mrs. Johnson, anything that you would like to add as we move towards summarizing from the panelists around self-care,
I just want to add one thing to what Ms. Hirala said in respect of child care. I think is in the workplace also.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
When I was in service, our controller of accounts, one thing, my children, that's why I said I was never stressed or anything like that in respect of self-care. The controller of accounts then, he used to allow the children to come to work. You would put them on a chair, they would be coloring or whatever, while you do what you have to do. He was very, very compassionate. I must admit that. So my children grew up in the treasury. Let's say that. They grew up in the treasury. Because when it's holiday time, we couldn't take holidays to stay home with them. So we have to carry them to work. And the controller was very accommodating in that regard, right? They didn't used to disturb other people, whatnot. I would have one, my husband would have one, as the case may be, right? Today, when I was at the Ministry of National Security, now that is at the Treasury, as I said, they grew up there, went secondary school, and then they were able to find a way home and blah, 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 right? today when I retired and I went to the Ministry of National Security, they did not allow children there at all. At all. I remembered I had one of my workers. She was working under me, one of my, well, you know, my subordinates. And she would say, Sandy, I don't have any more days. I can't leave them home. The children small. You will keep them inside by you because I had an office. You would keep. I said, of course, bring them. Bring something for them to do. So I will place them in a dressing room because I know what was handed to me then, back then in the day. And I had to reciprocate that to my fellow person, right? Although sometimes the director then, he would pass around and he would say, Sandy, what are these children doing here? I said, I allow them to come in. Well, I was a senior person because he was retired as yet. So I was able to answer him accordingly without being afraid of him or anything. You understand? That's how they work. And I would say, no, she has nowhere to keep them still. So they are not disturbing me in any way. So I allow them to come here. So I don't know how it is now in the ministry with respect of that. But I was very, very fortunate then where my comptroller had compassion and was allowed us, not only me, but other employees to bring their children to work. Once, as a matter of fact, when we have closing of accounts, 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, I would set up some chairs and things and I would put them to sleep there. You understand? No problem, because they would provide transportation for us to go home. We didn't have a vehicle then. But what I'm showing you is that it was no problem then. I don't know if it's a problem now. I don't know. But it was no problem then. Well, I know in the Ministry of National Security where I was, it is a problem. They cannot bring them. So I don't know. I don't know if people have lost the thing of compassion. There's no milk of human kindness in anybody anymore. I don't know. Right? But that is what you have going now. So I could relate to Ms. Hirilal when she said that she has to use up her days to stay with her children. After a while, it says 14 days and then holidays, right? And school closed for 2 months in August. You know, can't take out what you're going to do. So, as I said, he's dead now, but I have always appreciated him for allowing us that, as they would say now, these are treasury children. They grew up in the treasury. Nobody had any sort of complaints. They were well behaved, well disciplined, come, sit, do work, eat, da. So I just wanted to add that to Ms. Hirilal. I could understand.
Yeah.
You don't have anybody to, in the
Yeah,
professional.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that feedback and certainly compassion. Yeah, compassion. And we take the lesson too for ourselves when we find ourselves in situations where compassion is required of us, that we would do better. Yeah. Because sometimes, when we require the compassion, it's easy to identify it and the gaps and where it's falling short. But we must remember too that there will be times when compassion will be required of us. And so we also have to keep that awareness of self to be able to offer it as it is required. Of course, within the limits of organizations, because every organization will certainly have its limits, and Ms. Hirilal did speak to, yes, that compassion component, but the need for policy guidelines too, because that is where the real sustainability would come. Those policy guidelines, we need them. Other than, if we don't have that, what we would have is we're depending on person by person. So we depend on the goodness of the heart of Rachel, we depend on Sandra goodness, we depend on Cindy to be kind, and then we meet Shyla and she ain't nice at all, so we suffer, But if we have the policy guidelines, then whether Shyla bad or good, there's a way in which care support must proceed. And so that is necessary. So thank you so much, Ms. Johnson. Ms. Hirilal, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I think to add, just we've been talking about finding support and asking for help. For me, what has worked is making a friend. So within your particular network or community, find a friend. Find someone that can be a sounding board to help you navigate through whatever your challenge might be at that point in time. Someone trustworthy, not somebody who's gonna end up on the road and talking your business, but someone who you can go to vent, someone you can go to let it out. And, you know, similar to what Rachel was saying, therapy, that in itself is also a form of therapy. I have found an excellent friendship professionally at every stage of my career. There has always been a one person that I have gravitated towards who I could share some of the challenges with, and it might be personal issues, it might be workplace issues, it might be relationship issues, it might be financial issues, just coping, and someone who you can, if they have the headspace, can help you, one, just listen, but also give you some perspective, because sometimes we are so much in our head. We are dealing with finances, we're dealing with husband or partner, we're dealing with disobedient children, so many things, and all the voices inside our head, and we're very overstimulated, and it can reach a boiling point. It is so important, and I found the benefits of having someone that you can really just go to say, you know, this is what is on my mind, or I'm dealing with this, and you let it out. That venting has helped me. Sometimes I'm overthinking a lot in my head. And when you get a fresh perspective from someone else who may be calmer in the moment, you realize, hey, you know, this is actually not as bad, or maybe I did not look at the situation from this angle. And perhaps this recommendation is something that I could look at. Perhaps this is an avenue that I could pursue. It helps to have support. It doesn't have to be a wide network. Find one person to be that sounding board in your community, in your place of work, whether it's your church, your temple, your mosque, wherever. Find someone that can be a support to you. So that is what I would leave you with, because it has helped me, and I think it is a practical, valuable tool/tip to help mothers navigate whatever the challenge we may be dealing with. So that is what I would leave you with this evening.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ms. Hiralal. It's about building protective factors around us and research around protective factors as opposed to risk factors. So, you know, risk factors are things that can create harm and sustain harm. And protective factors are factors that protect us and build our resilience and keep us safe. And research around the building of protective factors says that you need one person, one trustworthy person. You know, be it a child who just needs one adult to believe in them, even if it's not a parent and it's a teacher, but one adult, one person. And likewise, yes, if you find one person, not a major network, because I'm seeing, you know, in the chat, persons are also saying, you know, don't have that kind of support. They haven't had a history of that. Persons have not been kind. One person. Sometimes it's somebody in your church. Sometimes it's somebody where you work. Sometimes it is some event that you would have gone to. You sat next to somebody. You all hit it off. You all communicate post that, but just at least one person. And even if, like, you know, Ms. Hiralal said it, and we said it earlier, they can't give you the solutions. Your situation doesn't change. But there's this whole thing about catharsis too, about even if they are in the same situation as you are, but knowing that there's somebody else in the same boat with me, this is how she's managing. And maybe some of her strategy might work with me, or maybe her perspective is different from my perspective, and I can consider to try on her perspective sometimes. That makes the world of difference. So thanks for that. Ms. Edmond, is your hand up? Well, you have
I just
1
want to
minute
add
because you're rubbing Miss
one more thing.
Curlin. Yes.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to
No,
add
that's
one more
okay.
thing, and that
Yes.
is tap into your tears, cry. Make sure and cry at some point. I never used to cry. When I learned the power of that, that really helped. So that's all I want to say. That's it.
Okay, I support that. I support that. Okay, Miss Curlin, over to you. Any summarizing statements, anything that you would like to add to the conversation so that,
Yes.
yeah, so that you can be complete with your contributions?
Yes, certainly. I just want to go back to that compassion that many of you would have referred to earlier. I remember when my daughter, Ola, was writing STA, and I on Saturdays would have to leave because she did online. It was back during COVID. She did online lessons and so forth, and I would have started that, but when the place opened up and all these things, they could have gone in person to the lessons. So the lesson teacher was located in Philippines. So every Saturday I'm driving from San Juan to go to Philippines to take my daughter there for these lessons, so she can prepare well for SEA. Now that took me away from work a lot of times because there were events happening on Saturday. There were other things happening work related, but then me not being on work seemed as though it's a slight on work, but then I had to be there for my daughter. So at that point in time, that is where the compassion comes out. Your supervisor needs to understand where, where you are with your family and these kinds of things, and then be compassionate and probably empathetic. Be there to, to just coach you on, encourage you, these kind of things. At one point in my life, I did not have that in my workplace. I mean, now I'm seeing a whole different, environment, and so things with the other SCA preparation was different. But in that previous one, it was so traumatic for me because I had to be weighing my options. This big event is happening on a Saturday, but then I have to take my daughter for lessons, and I had to, kind of weigh these options and decide which one is more important. Ultimately, of course, I chose my daughter, but then that put me in the way of persons, my superiors looking at me and saying, well, you weren't here for this, you weren't there for that. But in my way, I had to explain to them, well, this is important to me, but not doing it in such a way that they don't think that I value my job. But to be put in that position, that is where, the self-care comes in, because you're going to be sitting worrying about your job, and then you can't be there for the child that needs you in her preparation or his preparation for this exam, because you're worried about what will happen at work. You're worried about all these different things, and that's extremely traumatic. The second point I'd like to make is that the support that we all referred to, you have to want to receive the support. I had, well, her friend, her mother would drive as well and take her to Philippines, and they live in Arangua, so it's close by. So I had to be open to allow her to give me that assistance at times when it was necessary. So she would take the both of them and then bring them back and that kind of thing. So that arrangement worked. But then if you are not open and you're not willing to speak to a friend to let them know the situation that you are in, then the support that is there, you don't tap into it. It's there. And if you don't, try to utilize, try to open up to the persons who can give you that support, then it will not, come to fruition. So one of the encouragement that I will leave with you all is that while the support is there, you have to want to take advantage of that support. Yes? Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, panelists. Excellent suggestions, strategies. Thank you for sharing them. As we begin to wind down and move towards the end of this webinar, we do want to share with you a framework called the Burn Framework, that really looks to integrate a mind and body perspective towards self-care. It's BERN, and it really stands for behavior, exercise, relaxation, and nutrition. And I think that our panelists would have identified all of them in different kinds of ways. So behavior, activities that you find interesting, that you enjoy, interaction with people. I know after, as we make our way through life, after some time, we get fed up of people. And we think, oh God, I had enough of people. I don't want, but we are humans, and humans thrive on connections. So it's more about choosing your connections than abandoning them altogether, I would recommend. But certainly we do need that social interaction and social support, love and friendship, healthy communication, etc. So we need to focus on building out this kind of positive behavior, exercise, aerobic and anaerobic. So those of you who like weightlifting, I love weightlifting. Weightlifting don't really like me, but I like it. I like jogging. I can't jog, but I like the idea of it. But yeah, simple walking, hiking, aerobic and anaerobic physical activity, and relaxation, meditation, mindfulness, committing to building your spirituality and practices around spirituality, and sleep, which we talked about, quality sleep, and nutrition, having a balanced diet. I know that there's a lot of literature now coming out around the value of fasting, intermittent fasting, 24-hour fasting, 23-hour fasting. There's a lot of literature, a lot of podcasts around the values of fasting, so you can look at it. And of course, for some persons who need supplements, utilizing supplements to build your capacity to cope. Nutrition is very important. I know for me, if I'm not eating clean, I struggle. If I'm eating well, I'm eating clean, and I'm having long days, because I usually have long days. But if my nutrition is in order and I'm getting some exercise, I'm able to cope with it better. If I'm eating wild and eating a lot of sweet things, which I like, and a lot of snacking in between and not having complete meals, it really, I'm challenged to be able to cope with the stresses of the day as they come to me. So those things are important. So to consider strategies within this burn framework and build it in progressively into your daily routine, weekly routine, as you make a commitment towards self-care. And Ms. Ramdin, do you have the self-care plan? Can you put that up? I want to challenge you to do this as a post-session activity. Next slide. The slide with the simple 3-step self-care plan. So as a post-session activity, we want you to do 3 things. We want you to identify one major stressor that you are experiencing in your mothering journey. Next slide. No, move. You need to move through for me. It's slide 33, so it's way down. Or it's maybe 33 on my slides. So we want to identify one stressful event that you experience, maybe on a weekly basis, something in your journey of mothering that triggers a stress response. And then we want you to choose one realistic self-care habit. One. Out of all of the strategies that you've heard from our panelists, all of the strategies that we've talked about, one realistic self-care habit as an intervention to this stressful activity that presents itself to you on a daily or weekly basis. And we want you to schedule it into your week. And we want you to try it for at least 4 weeks. So identify one stressful trigger, one stressful event, choose one realistic self-care habit that you can integrate into your week. And I'm saying to you, I want you to try it at least for 1 full month and observe the ways in which your body responds differently and your mind responds differently, and your capacity to cope with this very stressor, which most likely is not going to go away, how you are able to respond to it differently. So we want to challenge you for that. And Shaila, can you put up the next slide for me, please? We have some questions that we want you to leave with as well. You don't need to answer it in the chat, but we want you to consider, as you lead the session today, what do you need more of in your life? What do you need more of? What is currently draining your energy the most? Now, don't decide it's your job and get up and decide you're not going back to work tomorrow, right? And then say Miss Edmond tell you, because you can't say it's Bastian tell you. So it's either Miss Edmond, let me get my panelist names right. It's either Miss Edmond, Miss Johnson, Miss Hiralal, or Mrs. Curley and tell you, because it doesn't me. But what drains my energy the most? Huh?
I said joint retirement.
Right? What drains you the most? And what is one act of care that you can give yourself this week? So what do you need more of in your life? What is draining your energy the most? And what is one act of care you can give yourself this week? Now, the thing that is draining you the most may be a big thing. I'm seeing some things in the chat, and some of those things are big things. And then you won't be able to solve or get rid of that stressor in a week. But certainly you can integrate at least one act of care for yourself to help you manage it a little better. Fair? Because when mothers thrive, families thrive, and taking care of yourself is certainly one of the most powerful things you can do for your children. Yeah. I want to, as we come to the end of the session, I want to take a minute to say thank you, profound, expressive thank you to our panelists, Ms. Edmond, Mrs. Johnson, Ms. Hiralal, and Mrs. Curley. I saw you all be very open and very vulnerable with our participants, and I really appreciate it. You know, too many times I think that when we have webinars or we have quote unquote formal opportunities to engage with persons, we tend to be so formal. We do prepared speeches, we prepare responses, and we spend so much time focusing on the way in which we deliver, we lose the opportunity to connect. But each of you this afternoon into evening have been able to connect well, and connecting in a virtual forum is significantly challenging. And I feel like you've been able to connect because you presented your full, authentic self before us. You shared what worked and even what has not worked. And you made suggestions that are very practical and very possible to integrate into our day-to-day living. I know I am certainly taking a lot of the recommendations on board for myself. And from the feedback that we have been seeing, I know that persons are also going to be taking that. Yes, I'm sorry that we did not have the opportunity to field questions, but it would have taken us beyond 2 hours. And to be realistic, on a Wednesday evening, it would have been a bit too much. So we have to find other ways in which we can integrate that kind of interaction. So we would appreciate the feedback if you can send us that. You have our emails and in your own spaces to find ways to integrate that. I want to say a special thank you as well to Ms. Ramdan. Ms. Ramdan is an associate professional with the National Family Services Division, Parenting Unit. And she has been in the background, but she is really the person doing all the heavy lifting on this program this evening and before in preparation. So in the absence of the technical coordinator, who is very ill, who would have designed the content for this session, Michelle Boiselle Morris, in her absence, I really want to recognize her and to thank her. She's very ill and we do wish her the very best. So Ms. Ramdan, thank you for all your support. Yes. And I want to thank, well, the manager of the Corporate Communication and Education Unit is here. So we want to thank your unit, Mrs. Curley, for all the work that you have put in and support that you've given us. I really want to thank you. And for each of the participants here this evening, thank you for taking the time and for staying the course with us. We really appreciate it. Do look out for other initiatives from the National Family Services Division. And we are asking if you can fill out the form. We have dropped a link for an evaluation form, a short form to evaluate the session in the chat. or if you have your phones, you can access the form using the QR code before you on the screen. And if you can just give us some feedback so that we can do better next time. And if there are recommendations for other initiatives, also include that so that we can meet your needs. Thank you so much for the time. We will leave it up on the screen for a minute or so. I'm asking the panelists to give me 2 minutes as the other persons exit. Thank you.